Hi there. Welcome to Wrymouth Studio. I am very happy to have Andy Hobday with me here today. Andy is, as many of you know, the writer of our beloved Baron's War game. He's creator of other games too, including Gangs of Rome and so on. We're going to discuss that a little bit as well. And he is the half of Futsal Miniatures as well. Hi, Andy.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
It's amazing to have you here. It took us a while to actually get to that point, but I'm glad we're finally here.
I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased to be able to make it.
So I'll start by asking a question about the beginning, where your adventure with wargaming began. And to follow up, when did the narrative, the storytelling came into it as well?
Okay, I think very much so at the beginning. It was always about the storytelling for me. So I probably came to wargaming. I mean, when I started getting interested in fantasy stories, that kind of thing, Warhammer wasn't even created. It wasn't even available at that point. So uh, I was always a reader. My mum instilled it into me that it's always good to read, and I like to disappear into books. So I enjoyed lots of different books, and the first ones I can really remember reading is C.S. Lewis books. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So we're talking a long time. We're talking over 40 years ago now. So when I was like 8, 9, more than 40 years ago. And I'd found The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, obviously. And then I realised my local librarian, because I used to go to the library and get them out, used to go once a week with my mum. She said, "Oh, have you read the next one? Have you read the next one?" I had no idea that there was, all the other ones behind there, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, all of those things. And that whole experience, I think, opened up this idea of fantasy worlds and having narrative and really getting behind that and losing myself in there. And I also had loads of sisters, so my sisters would read at the time like Enid Blyton and Mallory Towers, etc. And I'm not saying that that's what I read, but they also had like the Faraway Tree, which was this idea of this. I don't know. Do you know anything about it? It was
No, I'm learning about it as you speak.
okay. It was a tree in the woods, and what happened was each of the clouds were different worlds, and they would come and attach to the top of the tree, and people would go up and they could lose themselves in there, that kind of thing. So they had these imaginary worlds. So all of that was quite an exciting narrative as well. So it was all of that kind of thing. And then obviously the obvious thing happened. I went to school and we did The Hobbit,
Mhm,
and that was it. That's what kicked it all off, really.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's
So from
funny. It's
so
it's quite funny because I you always speak about narrative, but when I spoke to you before the Grand Melee, I mentioned that I have a green sergeants fighting in my retinue and stuff, and your response to it was like, "Oh, they just arrived to Outremer." You know what I mean? So
yeah, of course.
you could see the mindset there. Um, I am quite. You mentioned Warhammer. Warhammer wasn't there, and yet,
Mm.
you somehow got involved in wargaming. How did that happen? Was it Warhammer after, or
Yeah, the first proper wargaming with miniatures that I played was Warhammer, first edition. But
Mhm.
before that, it was, and I've said this many times, it was the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, the fighting fantasy books. And my mum and dad had separated when I was younger, and we'd gone to my dad's for summer, and he just bought the book for a friend of his son who was in hospital, and he found this book, and he took it, and this lad had loved it, and he said, "Oh, I think you'll like this." So he bought me a copy, and that was just that was it for the whole summer holidays. Tried to do it obviously first without cheating, and then did it with my thumbs in the pages, of which page you turn to. And then from there, it just snowballed. I took that to school when I went back, and then someone said, "Oh, have you seen Dungeons and Dragons?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 nothing about that." Someone had the beginner's set of Dungeons and Dragons, you know, the old red book, and I just devoured that, and then started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And another friend of mine had some miniatures, some fantasy miniatures, and at the time I wasn't aware what they were, but they were really early Citadel miniatures with, you know, metal bases, that kind of thing. And we then started role playing using Citadel miniatures back then, and we're talking 1980s, early 80s. And you know, and I started collecting dwarves because my character was a dwarf, and I played loads of dwarves. And then another friend of mine said, "You've got a dwarven army there," and I went, "No, no, they're all my characters." He said, "No, no, 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 no. You should check out this game, Warhammer." He said, "I've been playing." He said, "You've got a dwarven army," and that was it. That was, he said, "Come and play," and we got it out, tried to play, learned the rules, and I was totally. I think the hook for me was you actually, in, I think it might have even been the first version, you could send off a dwarven character called Thorgrim Thorgrimson to Games Workshop, and because it was a dwarf, obviously I had to get it, and that was it. And then I found Games Workshop, you know, Citadel Miniatures, and there we go, off we went. But there was, even though that was the first tabletop games with miniatures, I'd actually played a game called Cry Havoc, and that was on a hex, like these hex-based games with counters, and it was quite detailed. It was a skirmish game. It was set in the Barons' War, funny enough, and I think that's where it all came from. And you had, you know, like a mounted knight, a wounded mounted knight, a dismounted knight, a horse. That was that kind of level of detail, and that was very scenario driven. So you had scenarios to play out. You had to clear a village, or you had to do this. It wasn't just a straight fight. And a friend of mine had that game, and that got me really excited. And then there was a siege, and I bought the siege. And then I found Samurai Blades, which was the same kind of game, but it was all about samurai. And that was those two games, I think, is what got me, you know, my real love. We're talking historical miniatures for samurai and for knights. That's really what I love.
I can tell by everything you're doing that they had an impact, because all you have is knights and samurais, and you know, and now getting into
Yeah.
fantasy. So that makes sense. So you discovered Games Workshop, but then you started to work for them. What was that experience like? Was it only like, you know, the counter stuff? I know you've been managing some stores and stuff, but was it
Yeah.
on that side, or you get involved in gaming side of it as well? And no matter what your answer is, what then, how that informs, like that time at Games Workshop, how does it inform what you are doing now?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. I was at Games Workshop for over 15 years.
Mhm.
So what happened was I went to school, obviously, did my A levels. I was going to university, all of those kind of things, and then uh, I think I was really struggling at the time, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and you know, maybe a bit wayward as I was, you know, that kind of thing. And I got to about 19, and I was still at home with my mum, and I wasn't sure where we're going. My mum said, "Look, you can't stay. You got to go and do something. You got to find a job. You got to do something with your life." And I had no idea what that was going to be at that point. So I actually ended up in Nottingham. My mum was living in York at the time. I ended up in Nottingham because I followed a girl. There was a girl there who got back in touch. I knew her when I was at school, got back in touch. She was there, and I ended up in Nottingham because she was there. And literally, you know, all my worldly possessions in the bag, you know, crashing at her student digs.
As you do.
Uh, as you do, yeah, yeah. I don't think. I think she was like, "Oh, you can come and see me." I didn't think she thought I was going to move in with her, you know. But then I needed to get a job, and then it was kind of like I washed pots, and I did all the stuff, you know, all the crappy jobs that you can find just to get money. And then I remembered that Games Workshop was in Nottingham, and obviously I wasn't I kind of taken a bit of hiatus. I was still reading books. I was still aware of it, all of that kind of stuff. And I was really was a big fan because, you know, every time I went to visit my dad, he'd take us to one of the Games Workshops. And there was only 6 in the UK at that point. So we'd go to Sheffield or Nottingham or whatever. There was only 6 Games Workshops. And he'd always buy me something, you know, it was a treat because I was there, that kind of thing. So I was still very aware of it, still really interested in it, but kind of just lost my way overall. And then lo and behold, they were advertising for work. So I applied and I ended up working I was living in Nottingham, but I ended up working in the Derby store. So with a really great guy called Jim Fox, he was my manager. And I think poor old Jim, I think he turned out to be my surrogate dad because I was a bit lost. And he was all really sensible. And he was an amazing artist. He was a great painter and he was really patient with me. And I was only, 19, maybe 20, that kind of age. And I needed this kind of influence. And I think Jim really steered me and he got me, and he was a lot older than I was. And he made it all cool. So I thought I could do this and I could be cool. And he was really complimentary. He let me put some of my painted figures in the cabinet, you know, at the store and that kind of thing. And it got me really like buoyed for it. And I think 4th edition Warhammer had come out at the time with the first Battle Magic, and it was all, you know, a man of war, and I was really excited working in the stores. And I loved it. That was a real big thing for me. But I think the number one thing for me at the time was Games Workshop made me feel like I had a family. And that's how, you know, that sounds really twee and whatever, but I was a bit lost. And it was all kind of, we're all in it together. We're all gamers. We all spoke this common language that not many people did. And, you know, you'd go to a party and people would say, what do you do? And I'd say, oh, you know, I work at Games Workshop, you know, Warhammer. And they'd go, what? And you'd go, you know, a bit like Dungeons and Dragons. And we'd have to come back, you know, this day and age, you go somewhere and you go, you know, Games Workshop, Warhammer, yeah, it's 30, you know, 30 years on. So that's how I started in there. And then I think there was another chap, Chris Bone, who was our area manager. And with Chris and Jim and stuff, they made me realize I could do anything I wanted. And Games Workshop liked gumption and, you know, people who really applied themselves. So in the end, I was in retail for about 4.5 years, and I ran loads of different stores. I managed down in London, I managed Croydon, I managed the Plaza, I managed Oxford. I was an area manager, I was a staff manager, and I loved every minute of it. I really had a great time, and I met some really great guys, and who are still my friends today. You know, some of the guys I knew then, and you know, what did I get from it? A real sense of camaraderie and a good friend group. Really, that's that from that period, and then also opportunity because I ended up doing training for retail as well. And then at one point, the funny, it's really weird. This is because I never even thought I would do this. The IT department needed a retail manager who understood these archaic tills that we had in the stores, which were these Omron tills. And they were like, and the drawer would shoot out, you know, and they're like, we need to see if we can get information out of them and all of this, how they work. And because I said, I'll do it, I'll second in. And I went on a secondment into IT at Games Workshop and I never left. Wow. And I stayed in IT for about 10.5 years. Which was brilliant because then don't get me wrong, it was great in the stores and doing all of that, but then I was at head office and I then got to see all my idols, all my rock stars, you know, like Jess Goodwin and Rick Priestley and John Blanche, you know, they'd all be there eating their like Perry twins, you know. I would be mixing with them every day, and I know they were. Don't get me wrong, I love music and I've got some real, you know, guys I admire as heroes, but for me, growing up, they were my heroes. So actually getting to, you know, spend time with them and talk to them and them treat me like a normal person, that was again really really character building. I think it gave me a real good sense of value and worth. And then over 10 years, Games Workshop was brilliant to me because I'd left school with A level, good A level results, and the university place I didn't take. I think maybe because I like computers and programming and all of that thing. And back then, when I left in 89, 90, there was no internet, there was none of that kind of thing. So Games Workshop paid for me and trained me over 10 years. And they sent me all over the world to put in business systems. So I traveled to Australia, traveled to Canada. I did all of that stuff and met lots of different people in the business. So, that has shaped me in all of those ways. So from a business and a personal point of view, they kind of reared me, I think. And I'm not trying to sound soppy about it, because obviously I have issues with Games Workshop like lots of people do. But at the time, it was a fabulous opportunity that if you grabbed it with both hands, you could ride the beast. It was a very different place, So when I finally left in 2007 from choice, I chose to leave at the time. I think it'd run its course for me. I'd done a lot of great things. I'd put a lot of great systems in. I'd made lots of good projects work, all of that kind of thing, and I made lots of good friends there. So and people who I knew. But I left also feeling trained and confident and all of those things. So it kind of shaped me in that way. When it comes to gaming, I think like we obviously we're going to talk about that, but it gave me an opportunity to play games with so many different people who actually created the games or made the games, and you could talk directly to the people. So and it had great facilities to play those games in. So just even on the basic at a basic level, you could find someone to play a game with every week, and finish at your desk. Well, in the shops, we played every at least once a week, a couple of times a week. We had staff leagues, we had staff campaigns. You got to head office, there was people playing all the time. So it gave you played all the games, you collected armies for all the games they had, and you played all the rules. So I would say it gave you a really good grounding in Games Workshop games and their miniatures.
You lived the experience and
Oh
continue
yeah.
now, yeah. So you mentioned that you left by choice. Is it when is this when you joined the Warlord?
No, I left in 2007, and I was going to work for Capital One, the credit card people. So I felt quite institutionalized by Games Workshop at that point. And, I think for about 6 months to a year afterwards, anybody would say Games Workshop, I'd still say we, it was kind of like that ingrained. So I thought it's time to go and find a proper job. So, I didn't mean that in a bad way, but a proper job. I went and I did interviews for Capital One to be like a project lead for them. And it was a really good IT job, and I got really quite excited about it. I did the interview process was like you did online stuff. You did 5 interviews in a day, so it was like 5.5 hours worth of interviews. And lo and behold, they gave me the job, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" So I took redundancy from Games Workshop because it was the time where they were trimming the business. I got the job there. I had to have 3 because I was at the level I was at to do with IT and everything. I had to have 3.5 months gardening leave, so I couldn't so I was out of the systems for 3 months, so they could change all the passwords. So I wouldn't do anything but have that period where the business could move on, which was great. So for like 3 months I just was on holiday, kicking my heels with loads of redundancy, and my wife and I went on holiday, and it was fab. And then two 2 weeks before starting at Capital One, I said I was sat in this pool. We'd gone on just Lena and I at this villa, and I said, I'm not going to go and take this job. And she said, what? Like they'd courted me and all of that, and I said, I'm not going to take this job. It feels morally wrong to go and work for a company that does credit cards and track. I shouldn't say that, but
I
in
know.
my head, gets people to have credit cards who can't really afford them, that kind of thing. And if they don't do that, then that's fine. But it just felt morally wrong to me. So I rang them just about a week before going, and I said, "Hi, it's Andy Hobday, blah blah blah." I said, "Oh, Mr. Hobday, really pleased. We set your desk up. We got you all this and la 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 la. Is there anything else that we can do for you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm not coming." And they were like, "Pardon?" So I said, "Do I have to do anything to just, I've changed my mind. I'm not coming." Da, da, da. And they'd waited all, and I felt awful. They'd waited all this time for me.
Well,
And she said, "I'll just go and ask someone." And she went, "No," and put the phone down, and that was it. That was me turning the job down. So uh, Leela, my wife, said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I like the internet. The web was becoming a thing, like Web 2.0 and all of this thing." And I said, "I'd like to go and do web design." And she said, "Have you ever done web design?" And I said, "No." So she said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'll set up my own business and I'll learn it as I go," because I was a programmer. And I did that for about 2 years, I think. So I did that, and one of the customers I had was Warlord, because I knew John and Paul, and they asked me when they started from Games Workshop days. They asked me to come in and do their website. So that's how I got in with Warlord.
so what did you do? We know that you wrote your first game in there, co-wrote your
Yeah.
first game, but you I think you was a writer there. Is that am I correct to think that?
No, I went in. I worked for them freelance for a while, and I did all their newsletters, etc. Then after a while, they were kind enough to employ me as they grew. They wanted me to come in house and on board. So I started. I create a new website for them. So I ran all their website, and then in the end, I ran all their mail order. So I did the front end and the back end. So the guys who were picking and packing and dispatching, I did all of that. And then we ended up doing all of the social media, all of the writing for the for posts and all of that kind of thing, all the newsletters. So everything that wasn't trade sales around that kind of thing, I was responsible for. So I had a front end team and a back end team. So that was really cool. And then I started doing some more IT for them just before I left. So I even had all the general IT. So I will make sure all the laptops are okay, all the desktops, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so
Oh,
I
okay.
wasn't there. That was my job. That was my job. But I also got quite excited about Beyond the Gates of Antares, which was one of Rick's sci-fi games. Rick previously wrote a new sci-fi game, and I thought the game was brilliant, and I became like a champion for that.
Uh-huh.
So, which then was good because I got to spend a lot of time with Rick, and we did a lot of stuff around there, and they allowed me in the end to write a starter set for them, which was called Attack on Kara 9. Which was how to start playing Antares, here's a playthrough scenario thing, etc. So I did that for them. So yeah.
So when the samurais come in, did you start writing for them?
Yeah. I wanted to play samurai, obviously harking back to Samurai Blades, but I also at the same time I was teaching Aikido. So I taught Aikido for 18 years. So I had my own dojo and all of that kind of stuff, and I was really steeped in all of that. So I was kind of like very much a Japanophile. And at one point I was actually going to go and leave and set up a dojo in New Zealand and teach it full time. So I was really quite excited about all of that. And I knew Graham obviously from Games Workshop, but I also knew him from Aikido. So I known Graham a long time, Graham Davey. And I just said to Graham, wouldn't it be great? And he was working with me on the front end, on the website and stuff. And I said, "Oh, well, great to play a samurai game, wouldn't it, Graham?" And I said, "Yeah, can't find one that we'd like to play, like the kind of Kurosawa-esque kind of game, because again, storytelling." And I said, "Oh, should we just write one?" And he was like, "Yeah, all right." So we were there. We had loads of play testers because it was Warlord, and then in the evenings we'd be play testing Test of Honor, writing stuff for it, developing stuff for it, and then bringing it back, and the guys would play it. And after about 14 months, we had a game we were playing, and at that point, we were just using any miniatures we could find and just having fun. And it was good because Sarissa Precision were really kind because we'd asked people, we'd you know, sent the begging bowl out and said, "Oh, we're just writing this samurai game, and we'd love to get some buildings. Could you do as a deal?" And the guys at Sarissa sent us more buildings than we'd ever need. Said, "Here you go, use our buildings." So they developed loads of Japanese buildings for the game as well. So it was really good, and we kind of knew them because they'd come in, into Warlord, because obviously Warlord's a big client and customer there. So that all the synergy kind of lined up. And then what happened was the plastics, what they call war. I can't remember what they were called, but it was a war games company who did plastics, and Warlord bought them out. So, and one of the frames that they had was the plastic samurai from this War Games Factory. That's who they were called, War Games Factory. And Warlord said to us, "We know you're playing Samurai Skirmish. Would you like to do something in collaboration where we take the plastics that came in, we get your rules, we'll put it in a box, and we'll just, I want to say lease, but they'll, we'll have an agreement around the game that we'll have the game, it's your game, but we'll take it and we'll put it in this box." And that's what we did when that became Test of Honor.
Wow. Okay, that was actually my question. How did you approach them? But it seems it was a good coincidence that everything worked out for you.
I think it was a really good coincidence. I don't think it was a period that was really on John and Paul's radar, but it was an opportunity for them. So they were looking at kind of skirmish games at the time, and this kind of ticked all the boxes for them. And I think at the time it became their second most popular game behind Bolt Action. That was a great box. Everything about it was great, and they did us proud. They did lots of supporting stuff with it. It sold really well. It was great. For Graham and I, it was a real eye opener. And I think, again, for me, I think it was one of those things where it made me think, hold on a minute, maybe I can write games, because we'd done this, and I'd done Strike on Kara 9 for Antares, and I thought, well, maybe I can write games.
So that's pretty interesting. But okay, so you're at the point where, oh, maybe I can write games. So how does the process of writing games look like? You get an idea, obviously. Oh, let's make a game. I want to play some samurai game. Let's do it. Could you tell us? But let's use Baron's War as an example.
Okay.
So how does that come to life? From the first idea. We know already that it's from your past. When you was kid, you was playing that game. But how does it from the thought to final product?
Yeah, to be honest, it wasn't even on the radar. I hadn't thought, oh, okay, we've done this, we've done that, we've done Mortal Gods, Gangs of Rome, blah blah blah. Let's now do Baron's War. It wasn't like that at all. What happened was, I really wanted some Baron's War miniatures in 28mm miniatures, and obviously at this point I'd left Warlord, and I owned half of Futsal. I don't work at Futsal. I'm an owner of Futsal. I own half of it. So I went to have a meeting with Mark, and we were with Mark Farr, who runs it, and I was saying, look, I'd really like to make some Baron's War miniatures. He said, yeah, that's fine, but we can't afford to do it. So he was like, okay, what does that mean? And I said, well, he said, we can, but not this month, not this year, that kind of thing. And it kept getting back and back and back. And I said, oh, bugger this. I want to make some miniatures. And this was pre-COVID. So before the first Kickstarter we did, I knew Paul Hicks from my time at Games Workshop. He used to be a key timer in one of my stores in London. So he was in his 20s, that kind of thing, young Paul. And I'd been speaking to him and said, because he was making miniatures for Foot. So I said, could you make me some Baron's War miniatures? He said, yeah. They said, what do you want? Okay, this is the price. I said, oh, no. I don't want to pay for them. He was like, what? I said, no. I haven't got any money I haven't got any money to pay for them. I just want you to make me some. And he said, okay, what's in it for me? And I said, well, what we'll do is we'll do this thing called Kickstarter. I'd never heard of it, you know, and I said, it will prove the concept that we need to do it. And he said, yeah, okay. And, you know, bless him. I did say to him, look, if it all goes wrong, you tell me how much that would be in the miniatures that you've sculpted, and I will pay you back your sculpting time. And he got on board, and as you know, the first Kickstarter was a huge success for us. And after that, people kept asking for rules, and I hadn't really thought about writing any rules, to be honest. And my initial thoughts were to take like the engine that we did for Mortal Gods and for Test of Honor, that kind of thing, and you know, reuse it. But then it transpired that it needed more. It should have been a bigger game. So one of the pluses for me with COVID was I was at home, so I spent that period writing Baronsville.
Okay.
And that was the trigger.
Okay. Right. So what do? You do your historical research first. How do you translate it to the rule set?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I split it in two bits. What I would do is I write a key list of everything, and I guess this comes from playing all the games that we did at Games Workshop. You know, so we're having a game. What type of game is it going to be? So you write yourself a brief, and you say it's going to be a game, 30 to 50 miniatures aside, aiming for the point system. This is the kind of point system I want, and this is how I want you to be able to build your forces. So that's how you do, and you set that out. And then from there you go, okay, so what do you need to be able to do in a game? I need to move, I need to fight, I need to shoot, I need to do this. So you get all your core things that you need. And if you go to any single game, any tabletop game, they all have those core things. There'll be some sort of commanding rule. There'll be some sort of movement, running, shooting, charging, hand-to-hand combat, shooting combat, those kind of things. And some sort of morale where, you know, things happen to them. So you write all those things out. And then what I do is I think of, okay, how do I want that to work? How do I want each of those things to work? So I like to have you go, you know, alternative actions. One of the things I don't like about Games Workshop games is you win initiative, you move all your pieces, then I move all my pieces. You know, you may as well just go at the bar, and it's on the, you know, luck will have it, you know, whoever wins the first initiative, they usually win the game. So I like that idea that you can react or do something different. So that got the action bit in, and then you just build it up from there. So that gives me the mechanics. So, and then those mechanics, we take the basis of how it would work, adding basic dice probability that you kind of know, you know, and with D10s, it's great because it gives you percentages, makes it very easy. You know, we all know what 10, 20, 30% is. That's a low chance, 80, 90% is a high chance. You know, it's a lot easier to use them than D6s. And then you think, okay, where am I putting this game? I'm putting this game in medieval Barons War. Okay, so what are the key players? Okay, you've got knights, heroic knights, who are absolute, you know, stars. And on the tourney field, not the jousting, but the tourney field, they'd be like star football players today. These are your big names. These are your big guys. They normally wouldn't die. They'd be pretty rock hard, but they'd probably only get to do a couple of things in a 5-turn game. So it's okay to have them hard because they're not going to go rampaging. And then you get your next lot, and you classify all your troops. Then you look at history at that point. You then look at history and work out how they would fight. You know, you read about, if you read about battles. I knew quite a bit about it because I'm a bit of an armchair historian on the period. So that part made it quite easier for me. But then I talked to lots of people who know lots of things about it, and then they kind of helped and filled in the gaps. I'm always open to feedback from people in that period because I want it to feel right. And then you layer that on. So you can, you know, a man's a man. So your man's the man. But then what makes them different is training and equipment. So, you know, your knights they get trained all the time. They get the best stuff. You know, we worked out, I think it's about £350,000 in today's money to put a knight on his horse on the battlefield.
That was actually quite like You know,
But these
I,
guys are billionaires, you know,
yeah,
millionaires, billionaires at their time. So to them, that's not. But then you look at the you know, disparate, how disparate and that is down the ranks. And also a big battle at that period is 30, 40, 50, 60 men aside. It's very rare that everybody would rock up. So then you start to base your battles around that. So and then that gives you character and your structure. And then you work out, how do you want to play the game? You know, well, do I want to spoon? What, we can talk about this in a bit, but do I want to spoon feed people, or do I want people to have choice? You know, how do you want it to be structured? How much depth do you want to go into? And then, you know, do you let people able to build their own character? And because I like narrative play, narrative stories, I want people to be able to build their own heroes, their own commanders, their own troops. And this is why in the Barons War, you know, you can have green troops or, you know, veteran troops, because all of a sudden then, as you said, we were talking, you know, you at the beginning, you can then put some narrative behind each of your groups if you want to. And that helps, gives you a great narrative to paint them, how you want to have them. And when they go to battle and you play games with them and different, you know, different scenarios you play in, I like to remember guys who have done well, and it paints a picture for me. So the rules have to give that too.
I also think the abilities brings a lot to that Baron's War. That's task
Hmm.
stone to create so many.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we were saying, you know, the human stat line is a human stat line. So it's pretty throughout the entire uh, process of when we were building profiles. We had George Asling came up with a what we call like our Rosetta Stone. So here's a basic regular human stat line, and that can move up and down, and we associated points to it. Then from there, depending on what weapon you give it, give the human stat line, where you place it on the 4 different rankings from green, irregular, regular, veteran, the weapons you give, the armor you give, the shields you give, all of that is the same point. So that works across everything. And it's the same for everything. And then having commanders with extra actions, which they can give, again, that gives you another set of points. So you have all of that worked out before you even start to try what you're going to do. And then the subjective bit is abilities. So then you can kind of guess how an ability would fit in and what it would cost, but you then have to play test it. And that's the most subjective bit of it all. So that's how you build up all your profiles. So, but also having the abilities and the different levels of profiles of commanders. It then again, your entire retinue could tell its own story. So again, it harkens back to it being very narrative. And then when we decided we'd like to do Vikings and Anglos, you know, late Saxons, etc., Normans and the conquest. Obviously, we'd like to open that up. You and I could both fight Vikings, but your Viking warband and my Viking warband could be very different, because even though it is structured around what you can take a lot of different combinations of those things. And that again was something I was very keen to have, because I'd played a lot of games in that kind of early medieval, which I still like to call Dark Ages, but we're not allowed to anymore, wargaming kind of thing. And what you really turned up a lot of the time was I had a Viking warband, you had a Viking warband, and they were pretty similar all the time. And I really wanted you to have a lot of choice.